This is the GPL Podcast from GopherPuckLive.com. This podcast is sponsored by Jerry Peters and First Class Mortgage. Our expertise, your peace of mind. Visit us at firstclassmortgage.com. Now, here's Jupe and Vigo. Good evening and welcome to the GPL Podcast, episode number 221, not 121. There he is, Vigs. It was a fun weekend. I think one of the funnest weekends we've had in a long time, even though it was a win and a loss, but man, that was a fun weekend.
Great crowds both nights, great atmospheres both nights, both games delivered. I thought both teams played pretty well. We saw a lot of great things from Minnesota over the two nights, and just looking forward to the season ahead with the teams on the ice right there.
Well, before we get into this weekend series, we've got one of our favorite guests back on the air this week. Paul Caponigri is joining us. There he is, Cappy. How's it going, kid?
Good, man. How are you guys doing? You guys look fresh. Like, you just, I think with the farm, and then you
a little brighter, maybe
because you had the nice weather last weekend. You're looking a little more fresh. You're not like looking like winter weary right now.
Oh, I hope not. That's too early to be winter weary.
Yeah, we haven't got a lot of the wind chill yet.
Snowstorms.
Oh, that's tough.
Sorry to bring that kind of. I didn't want to bring any negative energy. Yeah, get back to the positive.
Hey, Cappy. Saw them surveying the rink. They're about ready to put the boards out for the outdoor ice. They had the surveying equipment out already because they know, once there's frost in the ground, that job gets a lot harder. So it's coming whether we like it or not.
Well, you get a long season at least, right? Like I've had some friends do it in some areas where they only get about a month, and they put a lot of work in, and they don't get the use that you guys get up there. Because it's not cold enough, for a long enough stretch. So, it might get cold, but at least you get to use those rinks for 3-4 months at least, right?
3 months these days.
3 months.
The season's gotten a little shorter.
That's a good solid chunk for how much work you got to put in.
Yep.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, Cappy, we had a fun weekend this past weekend. It was insane. I mean, the crowd was crazy. I was telling Vigo that I was getting warnings on my watch about audio warnings. It was too loud for a long period of time. We missed that rivalry 4 times a year, Cappy.
Sure. I mean, that's what you want in college hockey. If you think about it now, 3 of their last, 6 home games have been like that. If you count the Big Ten championship game. And that's what you want, right? That's, when they brought Bob in to kind of, rejuvenate things and get those rivalries going again. That's what you're looking for. I mean, Mariucci's a big place for college hockey, and I think the one year when they beat Wisconsin to win the Big Ten championship on the last game, it was pretty full, maybe like 8,085, and I was between the benches, so I could feel all that down there. And I was like, this place is just a monster when it's got this. So I think the students are consistent now there, which is great. Mm-hmm. That's always going to bring that. But now, everyone's not, you don't hear any complaining about ticket prices and all that stuff when you're winning and playing entertaining games. That you're not hearing that much right now, which is great.
Well, one interesting thing, Vigs, is that 2 sold-out games, more than 10,000 tickets sold. I was still surprised at the number of empty seats. I think we had like 1,200 Friday and close to 2,000 on Saturday. So that part I was still a little disappointed in. I mean, you compare that to the Big Ten championship, which had cheaper seats and 5 sections of students. That was a little crazier in my mind as overall crowd, but I was just a little disappointed that a lot of people didn't show up.
Yeah, I mean, Ian in the chat here has got MEA as an excuse for people who didn't go. There's also people in high school football playoffs or soccer playoffs or volleyball playoffs that are going on. When you have people buying tickets months ahead of time for an event, there's always going to be a redemption rate issue. I think it's encouraging that it was only, around 1,000 or so for each game. Usually Minnesota's been seeing 20% of tickets don't get used. And so that's why you want to try to create a standing room only ticket allotment. That's why you want to have those students.
There were a lot of people standing and didn't go find those individual seats.
I think people like that area, right?
I think
people like that area, right? Standing and talking with their friends and hanging on the railings. A lot of people like doing that. It's a good view up there.
It's definitely a good view. And, maybe some of the rink changes and, the ice is changing next year. Maybe some of the seating changes in 2 years, Vigs, it might lend it more to some of that standing crowd.
Yeah, I think they're going to try to create some different areas for people to have, bar top tables or, lounge type seating around the rink, which could be fun. But I thought it was a great crowd. I thought the crowd was into it. I commented to a couple of people. It kind of felt like one of those state tourney games when you've got two giant fan bases in the building, because every time your team was touching the puck, there was just a little buzz, a little atmosphere, like this could be the play that gets our team ahead or puts us back into it. And then there's a turnover. And then the other half of the building gets that feeling and that excitement. And the students were just great. And ever since COVID, students for every University of Minnesota event has been phenomenal. Football, hockey, the students show up and they're loud and they make a big impact on the game.
Well, let's get into the actual game, Vigs, and talk about game one. First, let's hear kind of what Bob thought of the game.
Overall, I like how we played today. We got knocked around the first 10 minutes. Our D were fabulous tonight, breaking the puck out for the last 40 minutes of the game, 45 minutes of the game. Our forwards were better. But still, we got some things to show to our forwards. But overall, great atmosphere, fantastic. So it's a hell of a battle with this program.
So I would say maybe that first game, the hero of the game for North Dakota was definitely Drew DeRitter, Vigs.
Yeah, he's had a lot of experience playing for Minnesota, coming from Michigan State, knew what to expect. I think he maybe got a little bit more pressure in this weekend than he was used to. North Dakota didn't quite have the structure that Michigan State would put out in front of him, and he was very accomplished over the whole weekend. He was calm. He froze a lot of pucks. He put pucks in the corners, didn't give up a ton of rebounds throughout the weekend. But I was just really impressed how Minnesota, again, had a 10-minute game from their opponent on a Friday night of a big series, and they answered the bell. The same thing against Minnesota State. I thought the Mavericks really pressured them hard for the first 10 minutes, and the Gophers were able to withstand that pressure and come out of it, pretty healthy. And I think a big part of that is the veteran D-core. They're able to get puck retrievals and break them out, and they don't get caught in their own end for long stretches of time. And I think that's been evident in 2 big tests so far.
Cappy, one thing that I think, even Vigs noticed and quite a few of us noticed in that first period, Minnesota was kind of flying against North Dakota, but boy, they still have a tendency of wanting to get that extra pass and getting a little too fancy.
Yeah, I think it's you bring in a guy like Snuggerud, right? Because he's like just a shoot first type of guy. Mm-hmm. I think it's always something that happens at home a little bit more.
Okay.
Everybody says it, teams get a little, let's keep it simple on the road, right? At home, I don't think it's like I really want to make the play in front of my girlfriend or, not like that. But it's just, I think you get it it's a kind of natural thing that happens. I'm going to make that sauce pass over that stick instead of getting this boring shot on net. You just kind of accidentally get caught up in that sometimes playing hockey. It's just a weird thing, and it's really unexplainable. But I got to see a good. I saw the stick toss. That was perfect timing. But I just like the way Minnesota's playing. And you guys said it, and their veteran decor. You just don't get that anymore of having these juniors and seniors that are first and second round draft picks in the NHL that easily could be playing in the NHL right now back, and you're seeing that's just where their core of their team is going to be all year. As kind of like, okay, we might struggle with scoring, but I think our D is going to be that consistent base, and Justin and net. So they're always going to have. I think they're going to have that all year long to rely on.
And Friday night, Vigs, Nyes kind of got off the schneid. It kind of became his game when it got to overtime, and Faber fed him the puck, and he turned on a dime, put on the Jets, made a great play to the net, and won the game for him.
Yeah, it's funny. I heard some reports out of Toronto during the summer that they didn't think Nyes' skating was a strength. And for me, for a guy that size, to be able to put that move on another big player and drive to the net and beat him in a situation like that shows me a lot about his skating ability. Maybe it doesn't look good in, the NHL, open ices or working on edges and stuff. But when you see him make that kind of power move in a game situation where it matters, it looked pretty darn good to me. He's got to find ways to create offense, bringing the puck to the net night in, night out. I think sometimes he gets caught up in the cycle and making plays along the wall. And I just don't think he's had a ton of chemistry with his line mates so far. But you see a little glimpse like that, and you're just like, there is a lot there still to be tapped.
One thing that was interesting also about this game, Vigs, is that Minnesota needed to come back and score late to tie the game and just to get to overtime. I don't remember seeing a lot of that against North Dakota in the past.
Well, it's funny. Brad Schlossman was talking about it, that North Dakota's had a hard time closing out games at Mariucci. And he was able to, pull out of his memory banks like 4 or 5 games where Minnesota has been able to come back at the end and take care of the Fighting Hawks. And Mason Nevers, came in off the bench, extra attacker, beaver tail slapping away on the ice. He got the puck. Yeah. And North Dakota was just a split second late trying to adjust to him. And maybe they got a stick on it at the end, but he came through with a big goal. And Nevers is getting a lot of praise from the coaching staff.
Yes.
I don't think it's necessarily something that the fans see or even we've seen, as much. He gets a lot of praise in practice, but it hasn't seemed to translate to the games quite as well. But he is one of the guys that's picking up the penalty kill the best. And, he's chipped in some offense too now, which is something they're going to need. They're going to need depth throughout their lineup.
All right. Well, 3-2 overtime victory, game 1. Game 2, little different, Vigs, and let's hear how Bob thought about it.
Well, that was unfortunate 4 or 5 minute segment where we gave it. I mean, we absolutely dominated for 55 minutes, and then we took penalties after whistles. And we let them back in the game. And then I'll give our guys credit because, outside of that little window, our guys battled tonight. And we played some good hockey. It's unfortunate that turned out the way it did. But
now, Vigs, he was definitely frustrated with the penalties. His voice was like, after whistles. He was a little more animated than this weekend about things like that.
Well, I think it's frustrating for Bob. He has generally coached teams that are the lowest in penalty minutes and giving up power play opportunities across the country. That's kind of one of his, DNA blueprint things is don't take bad penalties. And he addresses them throughout the year so that the guys learn and there's penalties for taking penalties. And I think with a young team, we saw, Pitlick throwing the stick, which was just a misconduct. It wasn't a minor penalty, although I think it definitely got North Dakota going. But then you had Cal Thomas making a bad play against the boards where, you just put yourself in a position where the referee is going to make that kind of call. You got Chesley getting a little stick penalty. And then you have Cooley, grabbing the face mask. Those are big momentum turning kinds of plays that that Bob just does not like. He hates offensive zone penalties. He hates stick penalties. He hates after the whistle penalties. And so the one bright spot out of this is that they were able to come back and send the game to overtime. And that's what you like to see as a coach, even when they have like this little lapse in discipline. They were able to rally back and recover, which is encouraging.
One thing that was surprising to a lot of fans, Cappy, was Moscow decided to start Bartoszewicz for game number 2. I know Vigo's got some feelings on this, but a lot of us were quite surprised by that.
I mean, I was, but I, think about it, and everyone's going to have their opinion, but this team isn't. It's October. They're not. I don't think they're at any point they're going to be fighting for a pairwise position of like 12, 13, 14. This is whatever. Hey, this team is too good. I can say it. It's it's not. I'm just calling it the way I've seen this team play so far. That they're not. That's not what he's thinking. He's thinking I got to check now. Personally, I would have had him play against Lindenwood probably in the second game, maybe, but
he did get that one.
He okay. I didn't know he played that game. I thought Close played both those games. So, yeah, maybe a little more puzzling. But you know what? Hey, you lost your goalie last year in January. Everyone thought the season was over, and Justin hadn't had any time really before that, and then he comes in there, and now he's you'd be lost without him. It's just crazy how that happens. And hey, it was weird 5 minutes that happened. Those pucks, it was a weird. It wasn't like he was whiffing on pucks. Maybe if Justin's in there high
and over him, it was really weird.
Yeah, that first goal, even that Blake goal was a weird one. Like I don't know, like it got deflected. I'm pretty sure it was going far side and went short side. So I mean, I think that's going in on most goalies, to be honest with you. So for me, hey, this and what they did, they ended up getting the 33%, whatever the hell. It ended up even out like a split essentially for the weekend. Frustrating for fans, I'm sure, but in the long run, it's not as bad. You're not going to remember that come February, or you will if he's had pressed to come in and he's had a little experience, thankfully, and he's prepared him a little bit. And I think it was the recruiting thing I heard about. Like I don't know, it was one of you guys or that talked about it. Like we got to know what we have in this guy. Do we need to bring in another goalie type of thing next year? I mean, hey, these coaches, man, they're thinking the next minute, the next hour, then the next day, and then 6 months from now, all that stuff. So there's a lot going into it.
I know you've got some thoughts on this, Viggs. A lot of people were hitting you up on Twitter this weekend, but let's just hear about what Bob actually thought about it after the game.
Can you walk me through the decision to start Barto over Close?
We wanted to give him a shot. We wanted to get him in there. That's all I can tell you.
I think you said something about after the Minnesota State series that you need to get these young guys experience in games like this and non-conference to develop your program. Is that part of what goes into things like that?
Absolutely. It's still, it's a long season. He hit 6 shots until we put him, like we kind of hung him once dry there, and I feel bad for him. It was kind of a good game for him to feel it, and cruise through the game. But then we did some things in front of him that you shouldn't do.
Viggs, I noticed he had a little smirk for you when you asked that question. Because he's like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, a little eye contact there.
Say anything.
He was trying not to, but there's a little smirk I could see there.
That wily pro Vigo got it out of him.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Bartoszewicz, he's a goalie that kind of bailed out the Gophers last year. Mm-hmm. They had a goaltending situation with LaFontaine leaving and Close being the guy. Brennan Boynton was not going to be an option for Minnesota. Much like Bob Motzko and Jared Moe did not see eye to eye. Same thing with Boynton. Like he just was not going to be an option for the Gophers last year. So
and 2 of the guys have started in front of him at AIC.
Right. He hasn't played at AIC either. So there's something there, whatever it is. So Bob brings in Bardo, who is a pro style goalie. He's a big body guy. He's all the things you look for in physical attributes with the size, the positioning, the athleticism. There's a project there for him, but he's a young goalie. He needs to play games to improve. As much as people think that you can practice and get better, the goaltending position is very different. You have to see live pucks. You have to see adversity. You have to give up bad goals. You have to be in front of a crowd. These are things that are important for goaltender development. Justin Close, he played, like 60, 70 games a year in Kindersley. He's an older player, mature player. He's played a lot of games. Bartoszkiewicz hasn't. He's not from a big hockey background. He played in Texas. He played a little bit in the USHL. He wasn't the number one guy. So he's got to get some opportunities in the net. And, they took that away from him by pulling him out of Youngstown last year. And so he needs some games here and there. And it's October and recruiting is underway. And if you need to find a goalie to fill in, they've got Weiss, who's the kind of Owatonna kid who's a late bloomer for hockey. He's a football player mainly, I think, in high school, then decide goalie's his thing. That's their third goalie right now. So if you're a program like Minnesota, you can't have a bad situation in goal. If you think whatever you have in goal is unclear in the future, you're going to put more eggs in the basket of either recruiting a goalie or looking at guys who are going to be in the portal. And they have to know that. And you're not going to tell that in games against Lindenwood, every time. They need to play some big games. And Bob didn't want to do that, putting him in the net at Minnesota State, but at home against North Dakota, after they won an overtime game the night before, playing well the last 6 games, that's a pretty safe situation. And it looked that way up until the penalty.
Yeah, up until Pitlick scored and threw his stick up over the glass.
Can't we just have some fun? No, I get it. It's probably like they probably were like, did he do that on, like, they were probably shocked, like, did he do that on purpose? We got to do something about that, right? But then the guy threw it back on the ice. Oh. I'm like, okay, let's just play on. The Sioux fan, the Hawk fan got his revenge by throwing it back on the ice like a Wrigley Field, throwing a ball back from a home run from the visiting team. But yeah, that was unfortunate.
I was up in the radio booth because it's a slightly different place where I could shoot and up and down in the ice. So I was right next to Frank and Wally and Pat Micheletti. And I didn't see Pat's reaction, but Frank and Wally, they were like, oh my God, they were sitting back in their seats like, did that just happen? And then Viggs, you were even asking, is this something that's going on in the NHL? Am I missing something?
Well, I'm asking if it's something in the video game because Zegras and Hughes have done this after overtime goals as part of their celebration. Right. They go up and throw in it's overtime, so the game's over.
Overtime, game over, right.
So I was trying to think, NHL 23 just came out for the PS5 or whatever version we're on right now. I'm 43. I'm not as hip to that as I was 20 years ago when I was playing the games. But I remember back then there was a update made to the series where after you scored a goal, you could do sellies. So you could do like the archer, you could do the kayak, you could do the magician. Like there are all these celebrations you could unlock. The swordsman. And so
the Temu shotgun thing, or
yes, you could throw your glove up in the air and shoot it. There's all kinds of sellies that you could unlock in the game. And so I'm just wondering, did NHL 23 just come out and the kids have been playing it? And there's a throw the stick in the stand selly, and Pet looks like, I'm doing that against North Dakota. I'm doing it, not thinking of the consequences.
I think it had more about him thinking I should have scored long before this. It was his first goal of the season. Maybe he just felt like something's off his back. But he obviously got the 10-minute misconduct. Got out roughly 2 to 3 minutes, something like that left in the second. Didn't play. Then he didn't play Viggs through 15 minutes, roughly.
Yeah, he was stapled to the back bench.
He was
next to Ben Gordon.
And he was
just taking it in. He was sitting back.
But you've talked about presence and attitude, and like kind of coach kind of waits a lot of times, and he's thinking, he's sitting back. He's not thinking he's going to play. If he's leaning forward into the game, standing, maybe I should put him in there. It turns out Pitlick was just sitting back. But Motzko, after he lost Cooley, he was running short on lines and short on energy, so he had to throw him back out there. And boy, Viggs, he came this close from scoring about 7 seconds after he jumped on the ice, which would have just been nuts. But just thinking that I don't think he would have played unless they were not short on players.
Yeah, I think once Cooley was out of the game, the bench is short and they were getting a little fatigued. You could see during the third period, North Dakota started going to their cycle, and they weren't even really looking to put pucks on net. No. And it was a situation where the Gophers just didn't have the legs to go end plays and get the puck back. So that was a tough spot. But I was thinking back to Kevin Fiala and how the Wild treated him and how he got benched sometimes at the end of games. And their coach basically said, well, I wanted to see how he was going to react personally. Is he going to sit there and pout, or is he just going to say, well, I might not be playing, but I can support my teammates? And once he saw that, he put him in the game. Now, I don't think that's what Bob was doing. I think Bob was going, we're looking tired. We could really use a guy like Brown or Rhett out there. And it almost paid off. If he would have done maybe a little bit louder beaver tap like Nevers, maybe we would have seen goals like that in back-to-back nights.
Cappy, have you ever done anything stupid like that in a game? Or what is something stupid you've done you're thinking, what the hell was I thinking?
Oh. I mean, I don't have a long enough show for that. I mean, I've never done a celebration really that I can remember. Maybe anything just like kind of like to the crowd or something. If you're on the road, the student section, like Cornell has a really fun student section. Yeah. I mean, I wrote one story when I was playing. We're playing Cornell. It was the day of Ohio State, Michigan football game. And we're playing them that night and Saturday. And Michigan beat us at noon, noon game, whatever. We come out for warm-ups, and the Cornell band is playing the Michigan fight song as we enter the ice for warm-ups.
Okay,
and
that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, it was funny. Like, I mean, I'm I laughed. I'm like, I love that kind of stuff. Like but you want to be able to give back to them. And, we ended up beating them, and, you could taunt the fans a little bit. So, it's give and take with that. That's a whole different story. This stick toss, I was like, I have seen it. Like you talked about, I've seen those guys toss them. Yes, in overtime, a game is over. The stakes are done. But we're in that world where we see everything and we copy what we like, and he, the emotion of scoring a big goal, he lost it. I'm sure he won't do that again, based on the punishment. And I'm sure the coaches spoke to him. And I think it's something where like, it's a good lesson to get in October, right? Viggs, not in February or March. So, to go back to the game and not go on a huge tangent, I liked how the game ended because you're watching that and you watch him score the fourth goal and you look at the bench because it goes right to Bob, right? And then you see the players, and a lot of players have deer in the headlight eyes, like, holy shit, what just happened, right? Mm-hmm. But they came back. They battled back. They were the better team most of the series, which that hasn't always been the case with when they're playing North Dakota. So I can see he's like, I want to punch him, but then I also want to hug him. It's like both emotion. Like he's pissed at him, but then he's also happy with him because they did some things where you've seen the Gophers get some trouble like that, and then it just goes downhill and they lose 6-2, right? And that did not happen. They came back. They got the percentage points, whatever you want to call it. And so lessons learned, hopefully, but I love the way they came back in that game.
Viggs, Motzko used the word battled. And they really did, after they were down, after they were stupid, they really recovered. Couldn't quite win the game, but he liked what he saw.
Well, I think that's the biggest thing we can take out of the last two series for Minnesota against the Mavericks and Fighting Hawks. Those are typically two series where Minnesota has had a tendency to get caught up, showing off their skill in transition. I thought these last two series, they showed their compete. They showed their battle in front of the net, winning second chances with their forecheck. I just was really impressed with that. That's something we haven't seen at Minnesota for quite a while.
Definitely. Well, we're wrapping up that part of the season, and now we're kicking off the non-conference part of the season. But before we get into that, we need to hear from our sponsor.
Hey, Gopher hockey fans. Jerry Peters here with First Class Mortgage. Mortgage rates have gone up in 2022. We've seen it on the news all year long, and many first-time home buyers are asking themselves, can I still afford to buy a home? My question is, can you still afford to rent? The Department of Housing and Urban Development recently came out with their American Home Ownership Survey. It shows that the median renter now pays almost the identical monthly payment as the median homeowner. In fact, over the past 2 years, the national median monthly payment for homeowners has gone up 5.5%, while at the same time it's gone up 10.6% for renters. What does all this mean? It means it's still a really good time to buy a house. And if you're in the market, let me help. My telephone number is 612-940-3291. My email address is jerry@firstclasscorp.com, or go to firstclassmortgage.com and fill out a free online application. Mention you heard about me on the GPL Podcast and receive a $500 closing cost credit. Some restrictions do apply. My NMLS number is 480200. First Class Mortgages is 322842. This is not an agreement to lock into an interest rate under Minnesota law. First Class Mortgage is an equal housing lender.
All right. Thank you to Jerry for sponsoring the GPL Podcast. Well, it's time to play Ohio State. And that's why we always have Cappy on. He's obviously a former player, former superstar with the Ohio State Buckeyes. Cappy, Ohio State's, they're leading the league. 6 points. They swept Wisconsin already when we thought Wisconsin really wasn't much. I'm not sure they still are, but at least they're out in the lead so far.
Yeah, who knows, right? With Wisconsin, I feel like the Buckeyes won 4 games last weekend, or they got credit for they swept, and then they got another sweep because Wisconsin goes out and sweeps Duluth, that's going to be great for pairwise probably down the road. You would think. I assume Duluth is going to turn it around, or who knows? But the guys that you expected to be their top guys are being their top guys, and then they have a couple of one transfer, I think, and defense that's helped, and then a couple freshmen. The two names that obviously stick out: Stephen Holiday. Holiday's got 9 points leading the team, and then Tyler Duke on the back end, whose brother obviously is Dylan. Michigan's a sophomore. He's a U.S. national team. They don't get a lot of U.S. national team guys at Ohio State. They got him to go into that D-core with Lorai and McWard to really solidify things. And, it all starts in that, Dobish is you call me biased or not. Portillo's right there. I love Justin Close too, but I think Dobish might be the most talented. And it's showing right now. I mean, his numbers are great, and then he also had a kind of a stinker at UConn too, and his numbers are still really dynamite. So it starts in the net, and Steve Rollick's system, as Viggs loves to, they're very smart. They don't make a ton of mistakes, and their power play's been pretty good so far this year. They got 8 power play goals in 8 games. So we'll see. They're still that team. They don't have a stars up front. They're going to come at you with 3-4 lines, but they can all chip in some goals. They're going to get some guys like Sedlocha, the senior. He's kind of coming alive at 5 goals. You didn't expect that. So, I think I heard Rollick once say earlier, he's like, hey, I just want everybody to get a little more. So if a guy that had 5 goals last year, maybe he gets 8 this year. A guy that had 10, maybe he gets 12 or 13. And, just improve a little bit, and that'll help balance, because losing Georgie from last year is really the one big link that they lost.
Well, like Cabby said, Viggs, it starts with Dobish. It really does. He can shut anybody down.
Yeah, I think that's always the big concern when you play a team like Ohio State, because they can really frustrate you with their structure if you let them. So they're going to have to find ways to get him moving. I thought Dobish got tired at the end of last year and just wasn't the same goalie down the stretch, maybe for Ohio State that he was early in the year. So maybe that's something for Minnesota to really focus on, is have long zone time possessions and try to wear him down a little bit, maybe being early in the year. That's an opportunity for them to attack the Buckeyes. But I do think Ohio State is my third team or maybe fourth team in the Big Ten, depending on how Michigan does. I think Notre Dame's the clear challenger with Minnesota for the top of the league. But I think Ohio State, they've just got so much veteran depth. And I think they're going to be a deep team. And Rolik always seems to find a way to figure out what he has on his roster and how to make it work. When he's got skill and talent that can get in transition, he finds ways to use those guys and use their strengths. When he's got a team that's got a good goalie and good defenseman, he puts in a tight structure and a neutral zone setup that really limits other teams. And he's a great coach. And I think he knows what he has here, and it'll be a big test for Minnesota.
Corey asking, the day the Gophers finally get an NHL-bound Dobish/Portillo is the day they become unstoppable. We thought we had that in LaFontaine, Viggs. He was the goaltender of the year.
And he was a drafted goalie, and he was your prototypical guy, big, butterfly, positionally sound, very athletic. That was a big surprise when he left. But I think one thing with Minnesota and goaltending, the state as a whole does not produce a ton of great goaltenders. For whatever reason, the community model of Minnesota, you put your best athletes at defense. And Minnesota does a tremendous job developing defensemen. But our goaltending development in the state has always kind of fallen a little bit behind. There's been a couple like Ottinger, was a high pick type guy. And I think there's one other that I'm missing, but there's a lot of other guys. Like Hunter Shepard was not viewed as a dominant goaltender at Grand Rapids. Mm-hmm. And he played in the NHL for a couple of years, and then he gets back-to-back titles at UMD. Who saw that coming? So I think it's tricky to project goalies, and Minnesota definitely hasn't had the elite talent at goalies. They've found some good ones, like Shearhorn and Wilcox have been good, but they just haven't had the great ones.
Lindgren was the other one.
Charlie Lindgren was good, but I don't think he was deemed like a top player. When he was a goaltending prospect, he was very good at St. Cloud, but he wasn't that kind of prospect when he was coming up.
So what do you expect?
Hauser? Would he be the only one? Hauser?
I mean, there's Hauser, there's Frazee.
Go back 20 years now.
The thing is, even Hauser was thrown under the bus a lot. I mean, it's even famous, the old, KFAN guy, Jeff Dubé on here. He was on the podcast many years ago. When he wins a national championship, Hauser does. The first thing he does when he walks by Dubé, what do you think of me now? Because Dubé was just loved to throw him under the bus. A lot of people like Stauber, but it's not like he had it. I mean, he was in the NHL for a while, Viggs, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at college goalies, I looked at like the last 10 teams to win national championships. It's pretty rare for those goalies to go on and be like NHL stars. Like they have a hard time even finding a spot in the NHL sometimes. So it's a little strange, college goaltending. Like who would have thought that guy at Minnesota State, man, how did he do it?
Who knows?
Hey man, Justin Close. Hey, talk about what would be a story. That guy wins the national championship. That is the story of all stories right there. I know we're talking about homegrown guys, and that was the behind it, but man, that'd be incredible stuff if he's able to.
Close is a steady goalie. He doesn't give up a lot of big rebounds. He's very calm in the net. I think he moves pretty well. The one problem I think with him is, when there's a lot of traffic or there's battles in front of the net and he has to just try to get big, he can only get so big,
Right.
And we saw North Dakota's power play. They got the goal where one time he was kind of, well, that was Bardo, but that's the situations that a guy like Close can get in where they have to think about cheating across. And right now, with the way the Gopher penalty kill is, that's something he'll have to think about when they're playing Ohio State.
Right.
Cappy, when is Ohio State going to get just a normal arena for hockey?
Why did you have to bring that? Why did you bring that up? I mean, you have to. You know why honestly, you more have to do it, and you guys will respect this because you have it. But you have a national championship, #1 ranked women's hockey team playing in a garage, and I'm not afraid to say it anymore because. And I love my school. I went there and all that. But every other program has gotten a brand new building. Like the volleyball team in wrestling has this beautiful new arena. There's all kinds of new stuff all over the place at Ohio State. And you have a #1 Ohio State women's hockey team, just won the national championship. You have a perennial top 10 to 15 men's team in the last 10 years under Steve Rollick. And there's just – it's not coming. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm not trying to make anyone mad. It's a lot of money. I get that, but it is a travesty that especially the women's team. I don't know. You guys have probably never come near that rink. They're playing in a little practice rink that could maybe get about 1,000 people in it. And they are a national championship winning team. And they're the #1 team in the country now. Sorry to get on that tangent. But you fired me up.
Nadine Merzel is not like a quiet coach. She's a loud personality. She is outgoing. I can't believe it hasn't happened with her behind the bench.
A 5,000 seat arena. I mean, that's kind of the standard.
I would take a 3,000 seat arena. Let's put it this way.
Let's make something for both teams.
Right. But what I've heard.
You're not going to fill a 15,000 seat arena with the men's team either, at least not now.
No. The last rumor I've heard, and I'm so sick of hearing this stuff, is that they were going to maybe build a 2,000 to 3,000 seat arena attached to the Shot and Scene Center that the women would play in, and then they would be the practice facility for both, so that the team would be there, the men's team would be there the whole time, and then maybe you'd still play most of your games in the Shop, but they would play maybe like their non-conference games early in the year, say against whoever they get. The men would play, Bentley, who they just played. If they came next year, they would play in that smaller arena when they know they're not going to get crowds. But it's been all rumor, it's just, you got 90 million. I mean, they do have the money, but they just don't feel. Of course they do. They just, hey, I know. I've fought it for so long. I mean,
keep fighting, man.
Everything about the Schottenstein Center is great, aside from you're in too big of a place. Like the locker room's great, the workout facility, everything is great, except for you don't get the good vibes.
The reason
college style vibes.
I bring it up because. How great would it be? You've got #1 men's team coming in this weekend. You got #2 women's team coming in this weekend. Yep. Those games could have great atmospheres for both games. Well, instead, they're going to play them about at the same time. The men are going to play in this gargantuan place, and the women are going to play in a dome at the same time. So, people can't even go watch both games. And I was just thinking, how great would the atmosphere be this weekend for both if you had like a doubleheader, an afternoon, an evening game, and the men's team, because you get a 4,000, 5,000 seat arena, that place is gonna be hopping, Cappy. But you got 4,000 or 5,000 in that cavern, it's just not gonna work.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is they've gotten great, like the Gophers. Their student section I'm almost jealous because we did not even have one back then. And we actually got good crowds. Like we were post-Christmas, that bottom bowl was full, because we had a good team, and it was different then. We had NHL guys on our, we had some names on our team back then, but the student sections is really great back there now. So I think it's going to be a lot like that this weekend, where you're going to get a bunch of students in there. I think they're trying to do some promotions. But then, it's late October, man. People are thinking about Buckeye football. Even on a Friday night, it's like people have it's this season now, then it's hockey season this time of year. I mean, I don't think they're going to have terrible crowds, but it won't be like 8 or 9,000 that you might see in February, like last year when they were there playing the Gophers.
Bob did
more exciting, Vigs.
Bob did say at availability today that his team had no problem getting up for the Mavericks. They had no problem getting up for the Fighting Hawks. And then he didn't quite go forward, but he said energy is going to be important this week for our team. We're going to have to figure out a way to bring our own energy. He could feel it in practice on Monday that just everything was a little down. Maybe it's because they had to watch Rhett Pitlick skate Herbies or something, because he did say he was going to address that on Monday, and they felt bad for their teammate. But you could just tell that their energy level is not quite up to where it could be. And so that's going to be an issue for them on Friday and Saturday at Ohio State. I kind of wonder sometimes with a place like that, I'm not as familiar with the campus as I am the University of Minnesota, but at the University of Minnesota, it is hard to find a place to do a construction project. They kind of have to go find plots of real estate to do projects like that. I know St. Thomas, as they're looking for a site for their rink, they've been shot down all over, and it sounds like they're going to have to tear down some dorms and build a rink on campus and just deal with their own neighborhood for that. It's going to be a parking and transportation mess, but that looks to be the place where they're going to have to build their rink. But is there a situation like that at Ohio State with how things are going?
I don't. Yeah, it's exhausting. There's land out there just past where the hockey's kind of lined up along with like baseball right there, and then behind it. Now you'd be a little farther away, but there's plenty of parking there, and the students can find their way to get there. They nowadays with transportation and whatnot, they make it pretty accessible. I don't know. I know what's back there.
I'm not trying to make excuses for them.
No. I don't know what the politics is of it. Because what I know from what I've been told, where the old ice rink where the women play, then they have these very old facilities, the former basketball / volleyball / wrestling. They still do the skull session there for the football pregame. Those places are ancient, and you'd love for them to demolish them and do something else. But from what I've heard, if they bust those down, they don't belong to the athletic department anymore. So it would not be there to build sports facilities, is what I've been told. And I don't know what they would do at St. John's. St. John's an old classic building. I don't think they want to knock that down. That tradition of football and the skull session there as they walk through, the players walk in there and they play on the way to the game is like the biggest tradition at Ohio State, aside from dotting the I's. So I don't know what's going to happen. I honestly, and I appreciate you asking me, because you got me all fired up late at night, which is fine. But I don't know. I go in and I have friendships. JD Bittner was a teammate of mine. So, and I see Steve Rollick, and I'll go in and have a chat, and they'll say, well, we saw this, and but they get mad too, because it's just frustrating, because it's not all about just, hey, build it. The politics of the money and everything. It's a lot.
And the thing is,
it's not easy.
Every team is going to do it. Every coach is going to say it. Our facilities stink. We need better facilities. It's kind of the thing to do, but you really need that corporate. You need that fan. Right. That you need a famous
Pagula,
something like that, or a famous player that goes on, the NHL Network, so talk about it and says,
sure,
just some other type of pressures, because Vigs coaches are always going to say that no matter what.
Well, every school wants to make upgrades. Marriott getting upgrades. For a long time, it was the locker room, and then it was the training facilities, and now it's going to be the ice size. And I think you just have to try to keep up. And I think the contracts that the Big Ten is signing for their TV deals eventually will trickle down and handle some of these issues. Because with Minnesota, they're not getting donors for this next round of upgrades at Mariucci. It's coming from that TV money. So I imagine eventually Ohio State's going to be in the same situation.
And, the tricky thing about it is the facilities aren't bad. It's like, well, at least for the men, everything at that arena is first class. It's just the game atmosphere is what's the missing part. And that can't be quantified. It's not the same as say if if you're a top recruit, and this is my school. I don't want to knock this down with the women's team, but you walk into that building, or you walk in. If I'm Nadine, I'm showing these people everything but the rink. Like, who I'm going to bring you in. I'm taking you to a football game. I'm showing you all the beautiful stuff there. I am not showing you. I'm showing you 2 minutes of practice and have the players take you whatever and show you all the great stuff around. And that's just bottom line what it is. There's no way to sugarcoat that.
All right, Viggs, let's talk about the games. Friday night, 5:30 game, Big Ten Network. Cappy was saying before, sounds like Fred Pletch will be on the call there. Saturday's not on regular TV. It's a 4 p.m. start. It'll be on BTN Plus streaming only, so probably a student crew, but hey, get to see it. But thoughts on the actual games themselves here?
I think for Minnesota, they're going to be making some changes to their forward groups. I'm interested to see what that looks like. Minnesota's dealing with a couple illnesses that have come in, a couple bumps and bruises after their start to the season. So I don't expect to see any big surprises with things, but it's going to be interesting to see what Bob does. I think he wants to get Cooley a little more comfortable on the ice. I think he wants to get Hughlin contributing a little bit more offense. I think he's playing okay, but it's just not leading to productivity. So I think that's something they're looking to do. I think Brody Lamb has been a surprise for Minnesota this season. You know, they weren't even planning to bring him in this year until Bros left, you know, and that opened up a spot. And Bob said, you know what? We're not going to have you spend another year in Green Bay. We've got a spot for you if you want to take it. And so he's been a nice surprise. I think Charlie Strobel's been a surprise. So trying to figure out how to fit those guys on lines where they can be productive is going to be important. And the other thing is the penalty kill. It has not looked good the last couple times out.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah. You know, North Dakota really took advantage of Minnesota. One, getting them out of their rotations at the top of the zone, and two, beating them at the net. You know, there were guys attacking the net, and they were just getting outnumbered, and Minnesota was not clearing the puck on the chances where they had to make clears. So I think those are some big points of emphasis. You know, Bob doesn't want to work on the penalty kill in games, obviously, but it's going to happen from time to time.
What does Ohio State need to do to win this weekend, Cappy?
Play better at home against Minnesota. I think maybe they're happy that they're getting the home series in the first half of the year, because the last, I don't know, I can't remember, 3-4 years, it's always been the reverse, where they played at Minnesota early and they'd have that February series at Ohio State, and Minnesota would come in and take at least 4 points. It seemed like last year they swept them. They just got on that roll. That was when that Pitlick, Hughlin, and I think it was Lucius line just lit them up. If I recall, at least in the one game, Pitlick had a couple goals in one of the games. If Minnesota's struggling, the Buckeyes are going to have to score on the power play. And they've been as consistent as I can remember in the last 3 or 4 years on the power play, early in the season, 8 games in. Mason Lohrei is a he captains that power play. He's a first round talent. He's a stud. With the puck back there, and Wise can score a power play goal, and this freshman Stephen Halliday, who I mentioned, is a sniper. He's only got 2, but they're both power play goals so far. He's got 7 assists. He's got some hands on him. He's a guy that you wants the puck, on that side wall or that hop top of the circle on his. He's a left-handed shot, so on that right circle. And then Dobish has got to be good. Obviously, I mean that's but Minnesota's got so much coming out. You say they're trying to find their lines. I'm like, they remind me of Ohio State, is where I think anybody can score, and they have depth that way. But then they have these ultra ridiculous talent guys too. That hasn't come every game, and it will be interesting Friday. And that's why I have a certain prediction for the series. But it is tough. It's going to be tough for the Gophers, I think, coming down from such an emotional, especially Saturday night's game, and the highs and lows and the roller coasters there. But the Buckeyes, the power play is going to be big, especially, like you said, if Minnesota's struggling on the PK, and then, Dobish and Nets. I mean, that's, just kind of – it's going to be every game. Someone asked me a game where Ohio State needs to be successful. Dobish plays well.
Well, then let's hear that prediction. What do you think? What are the point
Oh, yeah.
distributions this weekend?
I think the game will go to overtime on Friday. First game one. The game will go to overtime, and then we're playing 3-on-3, so who knows? I'll say Ohio State wins in overtime, and then I think the Gophers take game two.
Okay.
They're just from what I've seen, it's very early. They played 6 games. I just think that D-core is just elite, and they have enough scoring up front that it's going to happen. And Justin Close is a really solid goal. He's exactly what this type of team needs. I just think right now it's going to be great hockey, I think, again. And the only way I see, the Buckeyes maybe splitting is if Minnesota comes out and, like you said, they're just drained a little bit on Friday night after that series.
What about you, Viggs?
Boy, I'm nervous about Friday's game.
Oh.
Just, the kind of the energy around the team and the program and some illness creeping in. I think it's definitely like that trap game kind of feel where they are probably going to be making some uncharacteristic mistakes. They're going to be on the kill. There could be some bad goals around the net, things like that for Minnesota when they're going up against a very veteran Ohio State team that I think is going to play pretty steady. I could see Minnesota out shooting them like 40-20 or something like that and kind of controlling play, but I don't think they're going to come out with the win on Friday. I think Ohio State steals the first one, and then I think Minnesota is going to get a little bit of a tough film session Saturday morning and play much stronger on Saturday, much more disciplined, and that's just what I think, and I think we'll see a split.
I'm kind of thinking along the lines of you, Cappy, but with Minnesota winning in overtime Friday night. And I'm just trying to get back to Mr. Positivity and saying 5 points for the Gophers, which still puts them behind Ohio State in the standings. But
you're going to talk games in hand in October? So obviously what's going to happen is Minnesota's going to win 6-2 on Friday, and the Buckeyes are going to win 3-2 on Saturday.
Just like we thought last weekend, Diggs. Remember when we had Brad on? It's going to be a wide open game Friday night, but they'll hunkered down Saturday.
Yep, kind of the opposite happened. I think they played real structure, and then they just couldn't help themselves on Saturday. But I think that's what we'll see. I'm not going to say.
Go ahead,
I guess the one thing I'll say is that, like I just said, Minnesota's got some good vibes of playing in that building, and with a lot of those same players back, especially the D, like Jackson Lacombe has played really well there. Johnson has played well there. And then, like I said, Huglin and Pitlick last year as young freshmen, they were kind of like their coming out party a little bit. You saw Pitlick score a couple really nice goals. That, you walk into certain buildings. I had a couple of those when I played. Notre Dame was a dump, but I had a great games there. So I loved going into that place. Miami, Ohio is that. Guys go into buildings that they, maybe feel a little extra juice because they remember, I had some good games here before. So that could be a factor, I think, for the Gophers.
And I think we'll see Huglin and Pitlick together this weekend. I think that's a pairing that works going forward. They're both players who do very well controlling the puck along the wall and then coming off the wall to make offense. And I think you pair those two guys together, you got something going there.
Agreed, 100%.
Thanks for coming on with us again, Cappy.
You got it. I'll see you guys in December. Fun. Well, you'll see me in December.
Oh, you coming to do a broadcast?
No, mostly studio stuff for me this year is what it looks like. But one thing I guess I'll say it now is we're still on the podcast. If you want to, I'll be on Big Ten today, tomorrow via Zoom, and we'll do I think we're gonna like a 10 or 12 minute preview of the Big Ten season, and
all right,
and then at the end we'll get a little preview of the game Friday night.
Beat that out.
Tomorrow's Big Ten today.
You kind of know when you're going to be on because I can flip on this.
I'll pop it on there, an hour before the show or so tomorrow morning.
Perfect.
But yeah, look for that.
And make sure you get the palm trees in the background tomorrow as well.
Well, when the sun's out, I'll try to get the window and the.
Don't you have a remote set up at the golf course before your tee time where you can just do it?
I shouldn't I? I mean, I should put my phone up on the cart on the inside and just drive the cart and talk. Hit a shot, keep talking.
Really obnoxious golf outfit, really bright colors.
I'm not that guy.
Oh,
I can't do that. I'd make fun of that guy. I'd be a hypocrite if I was that guy too. So,
well, anyway, thanks for coming on, man. It's always great to
yeah,
have
man.
you.
Love
Viggs,
it.
working on
Always.
anything?
Still working on my stuff. It's been a busy week for me, so
been great.
I'm deep into might and squirt practices right now. So
Ooh,
we'll get
intensity
there.
ramping up.
Yeah, season's coming up. We're getting our schedule next week.
What do you mean season's coming up? They're just starting?
Oh yeah, youth hockey.
Youth
We're
hockey.
just getting underway.
Minnesota's weird like that. They have the best
And
players.
high school doesn't start
Maybe-
till like
I know.
Thanksgiving, right?
I talked to my friends in the Chicagoland area. They're full. They've played 10 games in the middle
That's
of
not high
September.
school, though, is it?
No, I know. I'm just saying youth hockey. I'm talking about
Community model. That's how we do it.
and it's wild. It's wild. It's so much. Anyways.
Oh, it's all good. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the GPL podcast. Want to thank again Paul for joining us this week. It's always great to have him on. We're taking next week off, mostly because it's my birthday and I want the week off. So, and I'm turning 50. But, wow. So we'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll recap this, and then we'll talk a little bit about that Notre Dame series that will also happen in between. For those of you currently watching live, stay tuned for some overtime. For the rest, you will see next time on the GPL podcast.